Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Jahana Hayes.
Thank you. I'm just a teacher. Hello. Good evening. This is just weird. It makes me nervous. I think I'm going to fall. I'm sorry. I am Jahana Hayes, like he said. I am the 2016 National Teacher of the Year. And I don't think I'm ever going to get used to saying that or living this life. A little bit about myself, not because I'm so self-absorbed that I want to keep talking about myself, but just because that's the one I know. And as a teacher, I constantly ask myself, what can I do to be better? I can't change every person that comes through my door, so the one I have control over is me. Like you heard, I grew up in Waterbury, Connecticut. I actually teach in the same district that I grew up in. I was a really good student. I enjoyed school. It was a safe place for me. I have one brother. He and I were raised by my mother, and she was an excellent mother until she wasn't. At which point, we went to live with my grandmother. My mother was struggling with addiction, and we had a lot of different challenges. And my grandmother took my brother and I to live with her, and my 3 cousins lived there. And we really became a part of our community. I did well in school, like I said. And in high school, I got pregnant at 17, which at the time didn't seem like a really big deal because my mother and my grandmother had also gotten pregnant at 17. I worked for a few years, kind of living, doing life, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. But I didn't really know what that looked like or what I needed to do because no one in my house had ever gone to college, and there was really no discussion about what college looked like or what that journey looked like. About 7 years later, and I kid you not, I woke up one day and I said, this cannot be my real life. And I enrolled in community college. I didn't tell anyone because I fully expected not to finish. And I finished, went on and got my bachelor's degree, went on and got a master's degree, went on and got a graduate degree. I tell you this because while all of that does not seem like the path that would lead me to this stage tonight, talking to you, or being on the platform as the National Teacher of the Year, everything I just described makes me the teacher that I am. Everything that I do every day is about recognizing that kids come to me with different experiences and different needs, and it is my job to meet them where they are. As I travel the country, people ask me all the time, what do you teach? And my answer is always, kids. I don't think people really get that. Education is twofold. I thought that this was something that only I believed, and then I stumbled across some papers by Dr. Martin Luther King in my graduate work, where when he was a student at Morehouse University, he wrote, the purpose of education is twofold, to build knowledge and character. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Our job is not only to deliver content. Some of the most dangerous criminals are gifted with reason, super smart, building bombs every day. But what do you do with that information? So I went into a class determined to get to know my students, to connect with them, to build relationships. If you ever question the work that you do or the impact that you make, I can guarantee you that there's a kid in your room and the only information they're getting about school is from you. I was that kid. We didn't have those conversations at home. I knew I wanted to go to school. I didn't really know what that looked like. I knew I wanted to go to college. I didn't have anyone to discuss that with. Don't get me wrong, my grandmother was an excellent provider. She was a terrific grandmother. My home life was stable. She could cook anything without a cookbook. But the conversations we had about school, 2 things she said. don't let the school call here, and don't fail a class. End of discussion. All 5 of us knew what that meant, and the school never called home, and we never failed a class. But now what? So I go into my class, and I become a teacher, and I'm so excited because this is all I ever wanted to do. And the first couple years, I really focused on memorizing content, being a good teacher. I teach history. And I came into a department there were 14 teachers in my department. I was the only female. All men. We ate lunch together every day. All they wanted to talk about was the Constitution and Reconstruction. Like, that's all we ever talked about. And I was like, I'm not that smart. I'm not that kind of history teacher. So I really started to make an effort to get to know my students, because I remember myself as a kid knowing that I wanted to be a teacher, but not seeing myself represented at all in the faculty. Not much has changed 15 years later. At my school, I am one of 123 certified professional staff for minorities. I remember growing up thinking, if you have to see it to be it, then there must not be a place in education for me. Anyone in this room who thinks that education ends in your classroom is sorely mistaken. It is a shared responsibility. I started to try to convince students that they had a role in their own education, that they were not just passive receivers, but active participants. And I started to see what was happening. I started to go out into the community where I live and convince parents to join me as a partner in their child's education. And I started to see some changes. It's interesting because this journey as the National Teacher of the Year has really forced me to reflect on my own practices. And I realized that over the last decade, I've done some really good stuff. When you're in it as teachers, we never look for recognition, you just do it. You do the work that needs to be done. But I realized that I've been doing this all along. For the last decade, we've spent so much time trying to remind ourselves not to leave any kid behind that we've forgotten how to intrinsically motivate kids to move forward. We forgot to show them that they have value, they have worth, no matter where they come from or who they are. And I don't even know what the word is. When I went into this as Teacher of the Year, I thought all we were going to talk about was education and teaching strategies and differentiation, some of the things I do. And I realized very quickly that it was about me, the person, my whole life, and I was not comfortable with that. But then something started to happen. My kids started to take ownership of who they were and their education. My whole raggedy, messed up journey was encouraging them that they were okay, exactly as they were, and what they had to do was harness their gifts. And then I got the clever idea, this is the teacher in me, I started to convince them that now they had an obligation, almost a responsibility, to invest in their communities and help out. And I see this coming back twofold. A couple years ago, I teach an AP government class, and I was very disappointed because my scores were not where I wanted them to be. And one of my students said to me, "But Mrs. Hayes, every single one of us registered and voted." Okay. Our job is not just to produce taxpayers. More importantly, we have to produce citizens. When my students look at me and they want me to answer their questions about what's going on in their world, I say to them, we are responsible for each other. If kids don't leave us knowing that and understanding that, then we have not done what we have been charged to do as teachers. I am so grateful to the adults in my community who stood up and did jobs that did not belong to them, to the people in my neighborhood, to the teachers in my school who did not end their day and say, that's not my job, this is not my responsibility, but took a personal investment in me That's the only reason I'm standing here today. There are so many of my kids every day who come to school, and I send them off, and I pray every night that they'll come back the next day. We have to give kids a reason to come back to school. For me, that was the only constant, that was the only safe place, that was the only place where I mattered. Today, I know that it's the only place where I make a difference. So as this year, this whirlwind of a year, I struggle with, where is my voice? What am I supposed to do? What is my role? And I think it's almost serendipitous that I end up here today in Little Rock, Arkansas. Because as part of the Connecticut Teacher of the Year process, it's a very rigorous process, but I had a group of people come out to my school and observe me teaching. I had to present a portfolio. I had to do a lesson. And the lesson I taught was on a book that my students read. You probably all know it, Warriors Don't Cry by Melba Patilla Beals. So today, and I almost wish they hadn't taken me there because it really, I was so conflicted when I left Central High School. I went there today. And I walked on the grounds and I could just feel the energy and I could feel the responsibility, and I says, we have to do more, as educators, we have to do more. We cannot send kids into the world feeling like nothing has changed. And I went back to the hotel and I called one of my coworkers, and she reminded me of something that happened a few weeks ago. One of my students said to me, Morgan, you could probably tell with a name like Morgan, Morgan is a white student that I have, and she said to me, I'm so glad I had you as a teacher because you have shown me that what my father says about black people is not true. That reminded me that I'm already doing my part. I'm already teaching kids that we are so much better than what you see. We are so much better than what you hear. We are so much better than what we've come to expect. I ask myself every day, is this an education that I want my child to receive? If you can't answer yes to that question every single time, then you need to change what you're doing. I am so proud of this profession. I am so proud of teachers. And if you want to know how do we elevate this profession, how do we attract people, every day we go out there, game tight on our best performance. We are getting observed every time we stand up, not by our administrators, but by our students, by our parents. They go out into communities and they talk about who we are and what we do and how we've inspired them. Make an investment in your students. Love this profession as much as I do. Know that what you are doing is truly making a difference. Thank you. Done, but I'm watching the clock and I don't want them to give me the hook, but but really, I stand here and I just remember being 17 years old and feeling like nothing was ever going to change. I remember going home and wanting an education so badly and talking to my grandmother and her telling me, you need to get a job. And there are so many of your kids who are going home and having those same conversations and it's a one-way conversation. You have to be the other end of that dialogue. You cannot assume that the parents are taking care of it or it's someone else's responsibility. I'm sure my grandmother wanted to do better, but that was as good as it got. That was all she knew. She felt like that she was providing for us. We went to school every day with a hot breakfast. We came home, she took care of the house, and she was an amazing provider. But she didn't feel equipped to be an advocate for our education. And I see so many kids, and I think that's how I've connected with my parents, because I remind them that it's okay. It's okay that you don't know everything about education. The beautiful thing is that we're going to work together and get this done. We're going to work together and get this right. And I care about your child just as much as you do. And when we talk about, the last decade where people have been bashing this profession and bashing education, We have a tremendous opportunity. I know I do. Like I have been propelled into a trajectory where I am on a platform and I have a stage and a voice to tell people what you hear is not all education is about. You know, for the 95 things that are going wrong, there's 5 things that are going really, really right. And I'm the product of that. You know, and if you ever feel like, you know, this isn't working, this is helpless, don't wait for policy or legislation or someone else, the next big idea to fix education. You know, I say to myself all the time, and I say to my students, a flood is just a million tiny drops. You know, do your part. Don't wait for the law to change or education to change. In my district, I said to them, I says, I have a problem with the fact that we have 4 minority educators in a building with 123 certified professional staff. And my superintendent says, I'm not really sure what we can do. I went online. I applied for a state grant, secured $75,000 for my district to start a program to engage kids in teaching as a career. Don't wait for somebody to do it. Be the change you wish to see. Like, I think I'm in a very unique position because I get to see in real time the impact of the work that I've done. You know, as the National Teacher of the Year, my students were interviewed. I'm hearing some of the things they say, and it's funny because it's like a running joke in my class. I tell kids, teachers never know how good they are until they get eulogized. Everyone shows up at the funeral, and they all, she was a wonderful teacher, I loved her, I remember this one time. Right? I'm hearing this in real time, and that is so empowering. And the thing is, it just makes me want to do more. You know, it makes me feel more responsible. It makes me feel more eager to work. When I went to Central High School today, it made me, I called my coworker, we have to do more. Like, the work is never done. The teaching is not for the faint at heart. If you're looking for, I think we started with summers off. You're in the wrong profession. I haven't had a day off since like April. Seriously, there are no summers off in this profession, you already know. But kids, I don't even know if rely is the right word or depend. Like, I was inextricably connected to my teachers because I saw them as the path that was going to get me out of Building 9 in that housing project. So if you ever question the work that you do, you know, if you have a new teacher coming in, show them what's wonderful, what's amazing, what's great, what's good about this profession, because we are change agents. We are the promise of the future. We are the next big thing, you know, so thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for having me here. I am so grateful to be counted among such a noble profession.